Hey, AP Gov guys, Walsweir here again. I know the whole. Oh, and by the way, nobody showed up to my Zoom meeting the other day, which they are not mandatory. The Zoom meetings are definitely not mandatory, but I would not mind one or two people checking in next time I do one, just to say hi. I know you got a lot on your plate, a lot of stuff going on, as do we. But just if you can, try to jump in one of those things. And as usual, if there are any questions, just email. The office hours. My office hours are all day, all night. So if you drop me an email with a particular question about one of the lectures, the online lectures, I'm happy to answer it. If I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer. So obviously feel free to drop me a question anytime you need to, and if there's anything I can help you with anything, college, any of that stuff, just let me know. Okay. So we've kind of completed the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court stuff, and I gave you a bunch of cases to do. Now, those cases that I gave you are the quintessential cases that show up on the AP test. Okay, they're primarily between the two sort of sets of cases that we've done. That covers almost everything that's on the exam in terms of court cases. If you memorize those court cases that I gave you, you're going to be fine in terms of understanding that. You got to understand the logistics of the Supreme Court, which we went over in pretty good detail. But the Supreme Court is the third of the checks and balance. I say third in that it's the third that was created in the Constitution, but doesn't mean it's any less important. It's very important. Actually, in my opinion, it's the most important of the checks and balances, because it is responsible for deciding whether laws are constitutional and whether your rights under the law have been infringed upon. And that's sort of the bedrock of democracy. We're getting close to the test, and so I'm going to move on from SCOTUS, and now we're kind of getting into something. And by the way, you're seeing a lot of really good government stuff lately. Trump trying to exercise the supremacy of the federal government over the state governments in terms of opening up the country. You guys are very familiar with the federal versus state and the responsibilities of the federal government versus the state. Can Trump mandate a state to open? The answer to that is no. He really doesn't have that authority, because a governor of a state has authority over commerce within his state, and he also has authority over the well-being of the citizens. So, because the president can't oversee that, the president can the executive branch can get involved in something like Flint, Michigan, but it's the governor who has to say, okay, stop, the water here is bad. We need an emergency declaration here. The governor calls the EPA. The government brings the EPA in, and all of that stuff is done because the executive branch of the United States would never be able to handle the millions of things that come up that a governor is confronted by. So the Congress, the Constitution of the United States has made it very clear that the governor is responsible for a lot of those things. And One of those things is the determining the well-being of his citizenry and impending threats to the well-being of the citizenry. Now, he can call in federal support if he needs it or she needs it, but that is really going to be a gubernatorial decision. Of course, there are situations like Little Rock, Arkansas, where the federal government can send in the National Guard to enforce a law, but that's not what we're dealing with here. There's no law that says that stores need to be opened, that schools need to be opened. Okay, so when you apply for a liquor license in the state of California, you're applying to the state of California. Education is run by the state of California. So schools are determined, this is what we're talking about. This is exactly what we're dealing with, that you're seeing on a daily basis. Trump has handled this whole thing like a child, despite the fact that I happen to kind of agree with the fact that I think that we do need to open this country up, because I also teach economics. We are getting to the point where economic impact is getting it could be really bad down the road. And I'm one of those people who doesn't believe in, bankrupting a generation, my kids, generation, in your generation, because we have a very severe illness. But that's a personal opinion, so I actually do kind of agree with him that we should be really very seriously thinking about opening this country up for most things. But I also understand that, this is a really dangerous situation. We haven't been in this in a very long time. So, there's a little opinion stuff. But as far as the president's ability to just open California, that's just not there. That doesn't exist. So keep an eye on that stuff, because this is great stuff. I mean, you're getting a presidential briefing every day. And I wish he would handle those a little better. I mean, I do agree with him. I feel like the press has been remarkably biased against him, but I also think he's acted like a fool. So, again, I'm in the middle here, and for whatever that's worth. This is the stuff that we would get to hash out in class, ad nauseum, and get a bunch of different opinions. But we can't do that, unfortunately, because we are on lockdown. Anyway, let's kind of start to look into some of the other things that account for quite a bit of our AP government stuff. Well, obviously we have two parties in our democratic system, Republican and Democrat. Those two parties are when I say two parties, I don't mean to detract from the significance of something like the Libertarian Party, which I am a member of. But those are the only two parties that have any ability to exercise any kind of sway in politics. Let's be honest. So we have these two parties, Republican and the Democratic Party. These two parties have been around for a long time. They've gone through a number of historical changes that I will probably go into at a later date. But understanding the basic premise of both these parties is important to what we're going into, which is interest groups, because interest groups, by and large, do tend to have, in many cases, party affiliations. So the Democrats are socially progressive, fiscally progressive. They tend to subscribe to the ideas of John Maynard Keynes Keynesian economics, which believes that a government, and this is a very interesting take that does hold a lot of water. You're seeing it right now. That the government has the ability to spend its way out of a recession or a depression. And there's a lot to that from an economic standpoint. So for example, we have this stimulus bill, and you guys did some of you did a really good job on the stimulus bill. The others, just kind of got credit. But the stimulus bill, which was about $2 trillion, is money that the government is going to have to take out on loan. You can't just print money, contrary to what AOC and her crew of the new monetary policy people are saying. New monetary policy is farcical from an economic standpoint. But Keynesian economics is not new monetary policy. Keynesian economics is you can spend your way out of a recession. And there's some very solid supporting evidence of this. I think 2008, the bank crisis of 2008 was probably one of the better examples of the government being able to take on assets that were very toxic and hold them for a while. Did they have to borrow money to buy toxic assets? Okay, in something called quantitative easing? Yes, they did. They had to borrow money from China to buy a ton of assets to quantitatively ease. They had to borrow money to bail out General Motors. They had to borrow money to bail out the banks. Okay? But they can hold that debt for long enough to where the assets that they're purchasing can turn around and become profitable, which they did in 2008. Well, they didn't turn profitable till about 2010, 2011, and onward. That's very Keynesian. Putting money into people's hands is Keynesian because I can't take on a massive amount of debt. But the government can take on a massive amount of debt and keep me above water. And then when I get back to work, okay, the GDP from people getting back to work, the growth in GDP should offset a lot of that debt. That's very Keynesian. On the Republican side, the origin of Republican economic idealism is grounded in Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations and the notion of an invisible hand that is acting upon the economy of the United States. So essentially this invisible hand pushes good businesses forward and the bad businesses get eaten up, okay, because they weren't strong enough. Now, there's some truth to this. Okay? There's some truth to this. And, Smith's economic, the idea of free market economics, which the Republicans like to tout, that was Paul Ryan's big thing, free market economics, all that Ayn Rand garbage. But, and by the way, well, I don't know if Ayn Rand's total garbage, but there's a lot of caveats to that, to the idea that is in the Wealth of Nations. One of the most important caveats to the Republican idea of strong, this Wealth of Nations invisible hand is that you have to protect the integrity of the economy so that things like monopoly and unfair business practices don't occur. So yes, I 100% believe that Adam Smith that that whole free market notion is a very good, very well-founded notion. But at the same time, I just don't believe that the Republicans actually believe in Adam Smith, because they consistently are taking bailouts of corporations, and corporate bailouts have no place in free market economies. None. Now, I happen to agree with corporate bailouts. That's a much more Keynesian thing. But that's one of these things where the ideologies of these two parties are very blurred, And so my argument is always, vote on issues. Vote on issues. Democrats have great ideas on the economy. Republicans have great ideas on the economy. Paul Ryan had great ideas on the economy. Go after the good ideas. Conservative, fiscal conservatism is grounded in Smith. Okay, fiscal liberalism is grounded in Keynes. Okay, Democrats also tend to believe in more regulation. If you listen to Elizabeth Warren through her campaign, and I give her props because she has always been very pro hard regulation. I'm not going to vote. It's not someone I would vote for, but I certainly appreciate her watching out for the common man in terms of corrupt business practices, because corrupt business practices have no place in any economy, Republican or Democrat. So your democratic fiscal economic ideas are grounded in Keynesian economics. They are more progressive, more social welfare, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and I could actually say that that they're grounded in FDR's ideas, because FDR comes before Keynes. And we could almost make the argument that the Democratic Party, the modern Democratic Party's ideas are grounded in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 100 Days and things like social welfare programs. Lyndon Johnson, I know he gets vilified for the Vietnam War, justifiably. He did escalate the war considerably. But his social welfare stuff was really solid, progressive Keynesian ideas. So that's your Democratic Party. Your Republican Party is more that Reagan-esque, lower taxes, let people determine how they spend their money, the Adam Smith free market capitalism, trickle down economics, which is allow corporations to make a lot of money, and that money will trickle down, which again is not, it gets vilified, but there's a lot of good stuff there. Do you see, like we do have to take care of our businesses. We do, and that's my point would be that our businesses are very important the way that the Republicans say they are. And we should be bailing out businesses, but that's much more of a Keynesian idea. So, Republicans are kind of inadvertently crossing the aisle when they say we got to bail out businesses. I agree we should. Okay? I think anybody with any, sense agrees we should bail out businesses because the worker is a part of the business. So, but a Republican stance, the trickle down is you take care of the business employs people, the people buy houses, the people buy groceries, and there's your trickle down. The money gets invested in the community. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So those are your two political parties and their kind of economic approach to things. I've gone a little too long to get into the functions of special interest groups, but that's kind of the next key here. The next key is going to be, well, how do you influence these parties? Okay? How do you influence the process of creating new policy? And that's going to come from interest groups. I'll get to that next time because I see I'm already at 20 minutes. So guys, remember, you watch these videos, you maybe pause them and write down some stuff, or you go to your book, your review book, and you find, what it is that you have questions about. It's all very well mapped out for you. This is your AP Prep Plus. Anything I say on these videos in some way or another is found in here. Okay, and you whoop ass on it. This stuff really isn't that hard. Sometimes it's just a matter of visiting it. And guys, look, nobody passes an AP test without studying. I can give you all the court cases. I can lecture to you about, and I don't get to write on the board here, but I can lecture to you about these things. But unless you're kind of studying them, it's really to no avail. Those of you who aren't taking the AP exam, don't worry about it. I mean, look, you just come listen to my raspy pre-COVID voice and maybe learn a little something and do the assignments, and you get a good grade. But those of you guys that are taking this exam, it's very important, to listen to this and then kind of go to the book and say, hey, what was he talking about? SCOTUS, there's an entire section on the Supreme Court. This isn't rocket science. So anyway, guys, next lecture, probably Thursday, will be on interest groups and how interest groups are created, how they exert influence. And I hope I see it. I hope I'm back in school next week. If it were up to me, I would be back in school next week, man. Honestly, the economics teacher in me is like, man, just go back to school. Let's just take this on the chin. But whatever. Again, personal opinion. Anyway, guys, rock and roll. Good talking to you. Wish it was face to face. We'll get through this. Peace.